Is Kabaneri of the Iron Fortress taking advantage of the post-apocalyptic zombie genre? Is it simply riding the coattails of Attack on Titan? Or will it go down as an anime classic? Find out in my review of the final episode of Kabaneri of the Iron Fortress. First off, let me just say that initially, before Kabaneri of the Iron Fortress even started, I completely wrote the project off. I saw it as nothing more than an Attack on Titan clone. And yes, while at the end of the day it does have many similarities, and a lot of the same people who worked on the Attack on Titan anime series worked on this one, I still think this was a pretty unique anime experience. Was it mind-blowing? Not exactly. Was it really inventive and very original? Not exactly either. But what it did have was great production value and a lot of great characters that you could get attached to in a post-apocalyptic setting, which of course means everything's going to be very intense. You see, Kabaneri of the Iron Fortress essentially is like this high-octane survival series, which features a lot of really unique ideas that are pulled from a lot of other different anime series. But the final episode is just a showcase for ridiculous action. My only real negative complaint with the final episode of Kabaneri of the Iron Fortress is that it was clearly a rushed finale. They get right to the action in this episode. In fact, the entire episode is essentially just a big action scene watching both Ikoma and Kurusu, the badass samurai, just cut through multiple Kabane fighting against Biba's soldiers, all leading up to the big confrontation between Ikoma and Biba. Not to mention, Mume has just been transformed into some sort of giant black blood creature, which takes the form of some sort of weird colonized Kabane wolf dog horse thing. It's just ridiculous. It's the type of thing that you would expect from a really big, over-the-top anime series. So it definitely delivers on that front, and if anything, the final episode was still pretty damn thrilling. I do have to admit, I am slightly disappointed by the fact that Ikoma's form in this episode is basically just him with some weird black shit all over his body. If you guys remember at the end of last week's episode, he injected black blood into himself. This black blood was supposed to transform him into some super-powered black blood Kabaneri creature, and while it does, it really doesn't do that much. The coolest thing about Ikoma, though, is his brand new look, the fact that he's got his crazy steam-powered railgun attached to his very own arm, and I'm not even going to question how he even pulls the trigger, considering he's now firing it with one arm, but that would make way too much sense. But I was kind of hoping that he would keep the form that he had in the previous episode, where he had all of this steam coming off of his body, his skin had turned blood red, and he didn't even look human anymore. When you see him in this episode, it's a little jarring just to see Ikoma with some weird, like, black stuff all over his body. But the rest of the episode is still incredibly easy to follow. It's basically just Ikoma and Kurusu busting into this massive fortress and taking on Biba and all of his soldiers. But there's a lot of really great moments. My favorite moment of this entire episode probably comes towards the middle part, where Ikoma is going up against all of Biba's soldiers, and one of Biba's loyal followers is about to run over Ikoma with this massive train. And Ikoma manages to stop it by simply using some sort of weird, latent, psychic Kabaneri ability that we've never seen from the series thus far, where he just sticks his hand out, and this train just leaps up into the air and explodes like something out of a Michael Bay movie. It's a really exciting sequence, but it also makes you question, what the hell's going on? When did he have these powers the entire time? And why doesn't he ever use these powers again, especially in his final battle with Biba? My guess is, whenever there are Kabaneri who are infused with the black blood, they have like this one-off, one-time ability that they can use secretly. If you guys remember, a couple of episodes ago, there was the character of Horobi, who actually fired a massive beam. Kind of like something out of Dragon Ball or even frickin' Naruto. And it was weird because we never saw anything like that again. This is the closest equivalent that I can come to. Not to be outdone, Kurusu is also really awesome in this episode. They clearly have a lot of fun with his choreography, how swift he is, how just badass he is with his kick-ass looking sword. But the biggest confrontation in this episode, of course, is between Ikoma and Biba. After slaughtering multiple soldiers and Kabane, it all comes down to Biba versus Ikoma in this massive yard. Mume is unconscious for most of the episode, which of course is perfect so Biba and Ikoma can have themselves a pretty kick-ass battle. battle, which, while it is short-lived, is incredibly explosive, violent, and just damned exciting, if a bit rushed. It's really strange that Ikoma was able to destroy this massive train just by sticking his hand out, but Biba, who essentially is just a regular Kabaneri, gives him a lot of trouble in this episode. Although I have to admit, when Ikoma surprised him, got right up in his face, and blasted the fuck out of his arm, that was great. I especially love the visual image of Biba's arm flying across the lake and landing on the ground. It was just such a great moment. You were so ready for this guy to go down. Ikoma ends up saving Mume thanks, of course, to the special white blood that was given to him by one of the scientists, and then this is when Biba comes back for his big final revenge, but Mume actually ends up finishing him off by stabbing him through the heart with some big metal spike, and that's pretty much the end of Biba, or is it? I have a feeling that if they're ever going to do a second season, we might get to see the return of this character. The fact that he's a Kabaneri, the fact that he lost an arm, and we know that he'll probably be okay with losing that because look at Ikoma, for Christ's sakes. He definitely got one hell of an upgrade. And the fact that they kept focusing on his dead body multiple times, showing it trapped under rubble. Why would they focus on that so much? And another thing that's really interesting about the ending is that it simply is just an ending. We have Ikoma, who's completely knocked out, Mume, who is now back to her senses, and Kurusu, who make their way back to the big train in a really, really great way. I especially love how they're on this little rail car, and you have Mume, who quite literally tosses Ikoma, like, across multiple rail tracks, and they catch him with this big flag. And I really thought that they were going to kill off Ikoma in this episode, like he was going to die as the hero. But no, in stereotypical fashion, it looks like he's going to be okay thanks to the white blood, which somehow got into his body? I'm not really sure how that's possible. Maybe he got a little bit of in him when he was trying to inject it into Mume. I'm not really sure. All I know is everything ends really well for the heroes as they go off into the sunset onto their next adventure, hopefully away from the Kabaneri. And that's pretty much the end of the series right there. So, what's the rundown? On the final episode of Kabaneri of the Iron Fortress, it was a pretty satisfying finale with lots of action and some really great musical moments, and Ikoma just flipping the fuck out of that train. That was awesome. Without a doubt, one of my favorite moments from the entire series, and a very unexpected moment. When I saw that for the first time, I was just like, damn, that was fucking awesome. And there were a lot of other really great moments. Like, Ikoma himself was really great in this episode. He truly came into his own as a hero, and he had some hardcore execution attacks, like when he took out that one character by the name of Sahari, who was one of Biba's very loyal soldiers, and he just kills this guy point-blank range. His heart just explodes out of his body. Just so much impact behind a lot of the attacks in this episode right here. But really, this was just sort of like a straight action episode. Just Ikoma and Kurusu going on a rampage, taking down the villains, and saving Mume. It's as simple as that. But it really did wrap up everything nicely, and despite the fact that there is an end to the series, it is still open for the future. There is the possibility that we could get a sequel to the series, and I do think that is kind of necessary. There's still a number of characters they really need to expand on. I want to spend more time with Kurusu. He seems like he's a really funny character. I mean, he can be very deadpan at times, but his reactions are great, especially at the end of this episode when he's saved by Ayame as he's about to fall off this train. Just has the biggest blush on his face, and you can definitely tell that he's got the hots for Ayame. Can anyone blame him? But as I said, there is the possibility that we could return to Kabaneri the Iron Fortress at some time in the future. I mean, we still don't even really know where the Kabaneri came from, how they were created, when they started to attack people, if this happened at some point in the modern time or in present time, and then it regressed into this sort of like weird post-apocalyptic future. We still don't know much about the overall universe of Kabaneri the Iron Fortress, and I think that's going to be rife for some interesting storytelling if we do get to a second season. That being said, if we don't get a second season, this is still a pretty satisfying action anime series. I mean, it's definitely going to deliver on the action front, and the really cool characters, and it has some great production value behind it. In particular, I love the artwork of this series. It's like this perfect combination of old school anime and new school anime. And like I said before, I was almost fully convinced that Ikoma was going to die in this episode, especially with the scene where they're going back to the train and Mume actually ends up putting on Ikoma's cloak, almost as if she's sort of taking up the mantle. She's now going to become the shield and the sword. I thought that would have been interesting to see in a future season, but no, Ikoma's going to be just fine, and he might even be able to keep some of his brand cool new powers. And I'd like to see the return of that kick-ass gun arm, which unfortunately was lost in the final battle, but knowing Ikoma, he's going to come up with something a lot cooler than that. So what more can I say? The final episode of Kabaneri the Iron Fortress was an action fest that must be seen by all action anime fans. Don't write off the series just because you think it's an Attack on Titan clone. While it does have many similarities, it's still interesting enough and different in its very own way. The characters are enduring, the animation and the artwork is pretty damn good most of the time. There are moments where they do cut some corners, like when they show some scenes of people running away and it's just stilled images which are being shook around. But for the most part, when there's a big action scene going on, they do a really great job in animating it. And when compared to Attack on Titan, I think it's a little more colorful, which is something that I really appreciate. Because whenever I go back to Attack on Titan, the one color I think of is brown. But this one is just so lavish and beautiful, and there's some great moments for it. And if you're a fan of steampunk, you're gonna like this even more. And combine that with post-apocalyptic zombie storytelling and lots of cool action, you got yourself a package for one kick-ass action anime series. So, overall, I really did like the finale, despite the fact that it was very rushed, but I got a lot of enjoyment out of it, a lot of mindless enjoyment, mind you, but sometimes that type of stuff is pretty cool. So, I'm gonna give the final episode of the series a 4 out of 5. As for the entire series in general, it's either a 3 or a 4 out of 5 for most people. There are some episodes that are a little slow, and some might even argue that the first half of the series is better than the second half. The second half is when things just get crazy. That's when we start getting lots of big monsters and all types of weird crazy shit, as opposed to just like the regular zombie type stuff we get in the first half of the series. But I really liked that progression. It showed how crazy things are going to be in this world, and it separates it a little bit more from stories like, say, The Walking Dead or other post-apocalyptic zombie stories. So I really liked it for that aspect. So check it out, action anime fans! You might see something you like. But if any of you guys did watch the final episode of Kabaneri the Iron Fortress, make sure to tell me what you thought about it in the comment section below. Did you have a favorite scene from the final episode? Did you like the final episode? Did you not like the final episode? What did you think of the entire series overall? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you want to see a sequel? Who is your favorite character? Make sure to tell me in the comment section below. You guys are kick-ass! Thank you for watching this review, I really appreciate it. If you would like to help support the channel, maybe you could comment on this video, share it with a friend, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. That way you'll be able to see all of our latest anime and manga reviews. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby!